Parshas Kedoshim is one of those parshas with many, many mitzvahs in it. I wanted to focus specifically on the mitzvahs of lo sikom, lo sitor b'nei amecha. Not to take revenge nor bear a grudge against your fellow Jew. I still remember well, Rabbi Shachon, my 5th grade Rebbe, Shlita, taught us, made a tremendous impression on me, one of the few things that I still remember from 5th grade. He told us that Goyim call it their sweet revenge, but we call it nekama and an avera in the Torah. It's such an impression on me. The media culture, the Western culture, the movie culture really glorifies revenge to a large degree, but we call it an avera. We call it something that you're supposed to work on to try to overcome. Just to talk about the Isser for a few minutes from a halachic perspective and from a hashkafic perspective. Chofetz Chaim in his Psicha of Lavin, he talks about the Isser of lo sikom, lo sitor. His example is a person has a hatred for somebody because you asked him, let's say, you wanted to borrow money from him. You needed to borrow his car or something like that. And he said no. And now you have a bitterness against him, a hatred against him. And so now you look for that opportunity when you could spread rumors about him and spread lashon hara about him. Netira believe, just bearing that grudge against him in your heart, is the Isser of lo sitor. He spells it out in the Ber Mayim Chaim, even if you wouldn't say anything, just bearing the grudge itself is the Isser of lo sitor. And then when he goes and he takes that revenge, in this example by spreading lashon hara about the person, that's the Isser of lo sikom, that's the Isser of nekam, it's the Isser of taking revenge. So the Chofetz Chaim explores that it's a Gemara in Yuma, specifically this example of lend me your hammer, of financial harm. And that several of the Rishonim explain it specifically that, and this seems to be, to a certain extent, the Parshas in the Gemara, that the Gemara is restricting us from the Kamanatir, specifically when we suffer this kind of financial denial from somebody else, as opposed to, let's say, an emotional thing where somebody embarrasses you in public or spreads horrible rumors about you, that might not be the Isser of Nekama and Netira. That obviously if you're going to go and take revenge, you're probably going to end up violating other Averis in the process. But in terms of bearing the grudge against him, many of the Rishonim, like Rabbeinu Yonah and Shari Tshuva, for example, learn it that the Isser is only when it was a financial one, that you're commanded to wipe out that grudge, but not, let's say, from another type of affliction. However, the Rambam and the Sefer Chinuch specifically learn that the Isser applies even when it's something more like the emotional type of harm. And the Chinuch explains the root of the mitzvah is that a person should take to heart that everything that happens to him is caused by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It comes from Hashem. Nothing that he can harm you or afflict you in any way unless HaKadosh Baruch Hu decrees it. A person should know that his sins caused it. I would add that sometimes things happen to people when they're children. It could be that there are other factors, maybe that in previous Gilgal, I don't know, but Chinuch says we have to realize everything comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So when you deal with the individual, you have to realize there's no point taking revenge on him. He's not the cause. As much as he maybe was out to get you, but at the end of the day, he's not the cause. Everything comes only if HaKadosh Baruch Hu allows it. And he says it's tremendous toelis to calm fights among people and increase peace among people. I was just trying to figure out the difference between the Chinuch and, let's say, Rabbeinu Yonah, that I assume they both agree that we're trying to cultivate this mindset as much as possible and not bear grudges and not take revenge. I assume they're only arguing about what the responsibility the Torah is placing on us in terms of not taking that, in terms of how we have our perception of what was done to us. That I assume the pshat in the Rabbeinu Yonah is that something, when it's a financial thing, then we're able to. I would suggest maybe the difference between Rabbeinu Yonah and the Sefer Chinuch is that Rabbeinu Yonah feels that something which is a financial thing, the guy didn't lend you money, that people are very uptight about their money, very nervous and anxious about their money, that you can't take it personally when somebody denies you a financial thing, as opposed to, if he didn't lend me $10,000, he's not my friend. As opposed to the guy embarrasses you barabim or spreads rumors about you or gets your kid kicked out of school, whatever, something more complicated, that already is in the realm of something which you have a right to take more personally. And the Chinuch is holding it to a higher standard that a person has to overcome that and realize that it's from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Rabbeinu Yonah obviously agrees to that. He just doesn't feel that it's in the realm of the Isser to do so. Chofetz Chaim advises them we're doing with the Safek Doraisa. We go l'chumra and we try to eradicate the bitterness from our heart as much as possible. I want to speak about the idea of eradicating bitterness. I'm not sure eradicating bitterness is synonymous with forgiveness, and we can't go above our madregas. I remember one story, my Rav gave a drasha once in a Shabbos Shuvah drasha about the machlokas in the Achronim. If a person says, I'm mochel you, but he doesn't mean it at all. He's not really mochel you, did it work? And he brought down Rav Yisrael held that it worked, and he actually advised his Talmidim to forgive people who had wronged them, because then they don't have a halachic taina on the person anymore, and now they have to work on themselves to forgive the person. And it made an impression on me, and I decided to try it with somebody who had afflicted me very, very much. I think if the person would have asked me for forgiveness, I think I'd be able to do it. But the fact that this guy, that he did all these bad things to me, and he's just going to, okay, one less thing he has to burn for, it's something that I get bitter about. When I think about it, I think it's something that was umala above my madrega, and that's something we have to be careful about in general in life. For me, it was a lesson in not going above our madrega. But in terms of being able to walk away and not bear the grudge, it could be where that's something that we have to learn how to do, that we could be more on the madrega for. I wanted to share with you one other story that I once saw about revenge, and it made a tremendous impression on me. So I once picked up an interesting book. It was called Dear Bully, authors of teenager books, and they were writing basically letters about their experience, things about their experiences going through bullying. Now I don't remember too much about the book, but I remember one that made an impression on me. So one of the authors had a story that she was a heavy-set girl when she was younger. Two of the guys in the school, they used to call her the Galabi, some fat ghost from a schlubby ghost from a movie called Ghostbusters, and they used to sing the Ghostbusters jingle when she would walk into the room, and they made her crazy and totally tormented her, ruined her life, whatever it was. It's a very traumatic experience. People don't just age out of trauma. It's something they have to learn to live with, and so she went on with her life, but she always, she carried this around. It was tremendously harmful to her in many ways. And in adulthood, one time she finds one of these guys on Facebook. He was going through rough times, and she really sends him some very aggressive emails. You tormented me in life, and I'm glad that God is giving you what you deserve, you animal, blah, 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 blah. And the guy's response is basically, who are you? And so she was even more upset. She's like writing him. They went back and forth 2 or 3 times. She could describe exactly which seat she sat on and the whole thing. And, she's been living with this for 20 years. And the guy's looking at it. The guy's basic response is, no idea who you are, but I'm sorry that I caused you harm in the past. And, I know that I was a bad person and God's paid me back. And that's it. And she was sort of left with, now what? So there's a lot of things to learn from this story. But the one that I want to focus on is just this idea that she was all bearing the grudge and ready to take the revenge. But at the end of the day, he's done with it. There's nothing to fight against anymore. It's just he's tormented many people in his life. It wasn't significant to him, and that was it. And it's something that she had to learn to live with and to overcome. And to me, it's just a lesson in the idea of bearing a grudge that many times, it's similar to what the pasuk tells us, "Urakavat samos kina," that jealousy it rots the bones, that it burns us up, but the other guy, it doesn't even affect him necessarily. And it's similar, we might bear a grudge against a person, so if we're biding our sweet revenge and we're going to go slash his tires someday, so then it might affect him. But many times it's somebody. One of the best driving advices I ever got was from a friend was, you're never going to see the person again. And sometimes that's what it is. You're bearing a grudge, and now the person's out of your life, and now you have to learn how to live with it. And I think that might be part of the emotional health that the Torah is trying to give us. The Torah is trying to teach us that we have to realize things are from Hashem, and we can't let people eat us up and take over our life. I think that's part of what the Torah is trying to convey to us with these mitzvahs, is the idea of not walking around with that bitterness, to realize that everything comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and not to take things personally. And also this aspect of just not to carry these things around, that we have to be able to move on in life. We have to be able to let things go. May we be zochet to be able to develop that strength, to be able to move past things, and be able to live healthy, productive lives in the service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Have a wonderful Shabbos.